Oh man, here they come again.
Here they come again. This still has skin on the skull.
Even Aleister Crowley wrote about the homunculus. Jack Parsons, the father of modern day rocketry, tried to manifest a homunculus with L. Ron Hubbard from Scientology. So we have people who are high ups in society, right? Higher ups, right? That are either notorious and that they use these, what I believe is a technology. Tony, I think that they're tapping into something that they understand, and they've changed it, right? They've changed it. And it's funny because Paracelsus, he had this race of this other monster that he would create called an Enochdiani, I'm sorry. And it's a mixture of Enoch and Elijah, which I know you like the Enochian magic aspect of it, but it was like these other little beings. So we have this guy, the father of modern day toxicology, talking about spirits, elementals, dwarves, mystical creatures. And he said that if you let a homunculus grow into old age and released it into the wild, it would grow into a magical being. So I'm thinking, right, like Bigfoot, Dogman, like what's going on? So again, I'm not saying that they're all homunculi, but I think that some of them, and I have other stuff that we can talk about that attributes these cryptids that we know of to some sort of alchemical processes or alchemical creations. Mind you, because they're tapping into it. Now, do I believe that there's another existence or reality in which they exist? Absolutely. But one thing about alchemy, dude, is that you can also, once you achieve the magnum opus, which is the great work, the creation of the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, because alchemy gets into immortality, and it also gets into interdimensionalism, because once you achieve the magnum opus, the light from that chemical reaction changes your DNA, and you're able to step outside of reality, and you're able to manipulate your reality from the outside. Well, this sounds like a whole bunch of woo-woo, but because of alchemy, we have chemistry. So because of the practices that these alchemists of old were doing, the ones that were involved with the homunculus and all these crazy ideas, because of what they were doing in the lab, we have chemistry. Okay. So it's like one thing lays the foundation for another. So from the woo-woo, we get the science, or seance, as I like to call it.
I love that. The science, or the seances. Well, when you understand the root of it all, I mean, it's not that hard to draw a connection there like that. So homunculus, the definition of homunculus has kind of varied over years, is what I'm gathering. And like, because you even mentioned like how Neo is a homunculus. I mean, he's not little, but he's a magical person. And so in that vein, and we can get into any topic you want, man. Like, I just wanted to jump off the homunculus, however you want to weave this. But in that vein, and this is going to marry the woo-woo, which is, like my middle name these days, to the conspiracy. But do we have politicians that are walking homunculus? I listen, is cloning possible? Anybody who says cloning isn't possible is living in 1985. Okay. It's very possible. It's been done. It's been admitted to. I have been on websites that have been sent to me by people that advertise human cloning. And so, yeah, cloning's possible. Now, is it a possibility to clone a person to be a homunculus, or how does that work?
So, as recently they had an article come out, I think about a month ago, where they admitted to, and cloning is absolutely real. I don't know if you've seen the latest, they cloned Tyrone, but in that movie on Netflix, right? These wizards there, they put a lot of truth in there. Now, about a month ago, they put out an article stating, number one, they've passed for us to be able to eat clone meat, clone chickens. Okay, so we can eat those now. The FDA passed it. And they also put out that they are artificially creating embryos. So without a male or female, they're artificially creating them. Now, you have also this conspiracy. A lot of elites, a lot of celebrities use surrogate births. Now, mind you, I don't want to disrespect anybody. I'm speaking on the literature. This is history. This is from the 15th century, from way above. So the idea of not having a woman within the life-giving process was a thing because they were products of their time, right? Women were looked as inferior in their time. So they were like, hey, the seed of man is magical. So I don't need a woman. I can, if I put it in a woman and I can make a baby, well, what happens if I take the matrix, which is womb, and I switch that out for something else? Now they would switch it out for an alchemical vessel, for a cow, for a monkey, for all these different things. Mind you, this is in the literature of this thing. And the idea that you're talking about, that there are people who are homunculus, right? Politicians, that some of them like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Zuckerberg, who don't really look human. They kind of look like androids, right? They kind of look weird. Well, that's not too far-fetched because Crowley, so I told you that the homunculus has transformed or transmutated from the time that it appeared all up until history. Well, in the 19th century, in the 20th century, I'm sorry, Crowley wrote about moon children and how to create moon children. And he took the alchemical homunculus and completely switched it up and was like, listen, up until the second month of gestation, there's no soul in the fetus. So what if we invoke a soul into that fetus in a ceremonial setting? Right, we have a man and a woman astrologically aligned. This is all in the literature. You can look anyone who listens to this can look this up. He wrote a book called The Moon Child in 1916. And in that story, because I believe that stories serve as a vessel for truth, right? And these magicians occult real, right, based on real events. They occult real things that happen in real life under stories, because the mixing of fiction and reality does something, okay? And we can I call that interdimensional literature. We can talk about that. But this idea, he took this story of these two lodges fighting over an unborn child, and he wrote also about creating, and he admits to that secret organizations have the knowledge on how to create homunculus. And I just did an episode on this actually. So he now, is secret organizations the OTO that he was part of, MI6 or whatever he was, because he was supposedly a spy too. We don't know. Or is it the government, right? Well, who is it? But secret organizations have this knowledge. And essentially, in a ceremonial setting, they copulate, they do the do, and they're able to invoke whichever entity they want into this fetus, and a regular baby is born, except it has the essence or the spirit of this entity. Now think about that. The world is a stage, right? Every man and woman has their entrances and exits. So what I believe they use this technology for is to play out their myths, their mythologies, right? It's always about the two brothers that are at war with one another. One unalives the other, right? So what if they're able to play that almost like a King Kill 33, where they snuff that light out and they use that energy for something else? Any exchange of energy, Tony, is alchemy. The monetary system is alchemy. We're exchanging energies. And if you trace back the origins of the monetary system back to the Knights Templar, well, who were the Knights Templar talking to? Baphomet, right? You have the idea about, well, Baphomet is also sort of homunculus because they invoked an entity into the supposed head of John the Baptist. Okay, so you have that mythology, and that thing prophesies to them on how to create the monetary system that we know today. They essentially used outside influences, astral influences, whatever it was, to divinate to them on how to create more wealth. So that's alchemy right there. And the idea of a Baphomet, this entity inside this vessel, it's also referred to as fetishism, not the sexual kind. The original definition of fetish was the dwelling place or vessel for a spirit or entity. And then it's kind of weird, right? Because fetishes are weird things that people have. Well, they took that, and in the late 19th century, they switched the definition. And I think that's on purpose, because the word grammar, Tony, comes from grimoire, and a grimoire is a book of spells. And that's in the etymology of the word. That's not a conspiracy. I'm telling you about the literature. Anyone can look this up. But yeah, absolutely. Do I believe that people always talk about the NPC theory, that there are people walking around that have no souls or inner monologue. No. Well, I think that the higher ups, that 1% could quite literally be homunculus, vessels for the elites to use for their own magical purposes. So I think that's an absolute, that could be more real than having NPCs, even if it is in this magical woo-woo way, they believe it. So therefore, it's true.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said that over the years. I mean, it doesn't matter what you believe; it matters what they believe. And in these realms, these communities that listen to these types of shows and stuff, a lot of people understand what I don't want to say understand, but there's a lot of people that believe in the power of manifestation through thought, and so it falls in line with that. We're talking to Juan from One on One podcast. I'm not sure if I said that in the beginning, but I want to make sure I say it out now. People can check it out on Spotify, Apple, all over the place. But Juan on Juan, so it's Juan on Juan. I like to play with words there. Also, the Chosen Juan as your screen name here. I think it's freaking fantastic. Now, Nephilim. Okay, so you're talking about this stuff, and I'm a Christian, and like I'm sold out on it. Okay, like I'm die hard. Like you're not gonna shake me off my foundation. Now, when you're talking and you're saying about this ritual that's basically overriding God's creation, it's literally like what you're describing, and I know there's lots of people that are Christians that listen to my show. Their reaction is the same I initially had as you were saying. I'm like, how can that be possible? How can Crowley literally supernaturally override the supernatural God in the middle of his creation? How is that possible? And I'm not the guy to say how it's possible, but I can say safely that it's been done before, because that's essentially what Nephilim are. Now, the overriding process was at the genesis of conception, because we're talking about fallen angels initiating the conception, and they are supernatural in themselves. But somebody like Crowley walking in a supernatural realm constantly, it kind of fits that bill as well, especially if he has those entities working on his behalf. So I'm just kind of setting the scene for you to kind of probably go in that direction. I saw you nodding your head when I brought it up. So go ahead and carry on, sir.
Shout out to Joel, right? Because he's all about the Nephilim. And if you trace the origins of alchemy, okay, and you go back to the biblical time, and not a lot of people know this, Tony, but I was born and raised Pentecostal Christian, okay? So I'm with you on that. I consider myself a Christian. We're both Puerto Rican, so it's like we got a little bit in common, right? So Puerto Rican Pentecostals, right? And if you trace back the idea of where alchemy came from, it came from the fallen ones that passed the knowledge on, right, to the daughters of men. And from there, I believe, and the reason I believe this, that Noah was one of the greatest alchemists of all time, and his lineage, because I am one that I study a lot of alchemy and I look at different alchemical plates, and there's always references to, you'll see Noah's Ark in one corner, or you'll see the two animals lined up next to one another. And if you follow the etymology of why these biblical patriarchs were able to live for so long, well, what if they had the secret, right, to the Philosopher's Stone, which would extend your life for X amount of years, right? There's a lot of references to the cornerstone in the Bible. There's references, right? Jacob's ladder, he put his head on a stone and had what? A dream, right? And then when he woke up, he anointed that stone. So what if that was what if the Philosopher's Stone was something that was available around everywhere, right? Before the flood or after the flood, whatever. It was just thrown around somewhere, because there are legends of like the golem, which is more of like the proto Frankenstein. I'm sure everyone knows about that story. And then that has its roots in alchemy, because Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley allegedly were studying alchemical manuscripts. And, right, if we think about the stories that occult true, real life events. Well, what if Frankenstein was a nod at that? Like, oh, it's a story. Maybe we tried it behind closed doors. Who knows? Let's just write a story about it. But that comes from the idea of a golem. And a golem is a magical man created through words, through magic. So not in a lab setting. It's more of a supernatural thing where they animate a man through word and he comes alive, but it's more of a cybernetic AI type of thing where it's programmed to do one thing. And the reason I bring that up is because in the 16th century, Rabbi Judai Low, or Love, how some people say it, he allegedly had created in Prague this golem that was meant to protect this Jewish ghetto. Now, the reason they say he was able to create this golem was because in the ground there in Prague, it's a very magical place, supposedly the prima materia, the material which you need to create the Philosopher's Stone, is in the ground in there. And there's something called moldavite. So apparently it's a crazy thing where this comet or asteroid or something crashed there. And essentially it's a crater. And when it broke up, it deposited all that moldavite into the ground. So whenever he would scoop up and he molded this man, he was able to animate it because it was already in the ground. Okay, it was already there. So I think of in biblical times, what if it was like that? What if it was available everywhere? These fallen angels came down. We're like, yo, we want to do stuff with you. We'll give you something in return for using you. You know what I mean? Everyone knows the story. And we're going to teach you these things. Okay, we're going to teach you where you have Tubal Cain, which is associated with the furnace. Well, the furnace is also associated in alchemy. So a metallurgy, metalworking, that's all alchemy.